This week in fantasy movies, we are so back. For Netflix's Magic the Gathering adaptation, that is. And Pixar workers may look fine on the surface, but inside they're sobbing and fighting with Disney to keep making good art. We'll break down just what's going on. Plus, a rundown of all the stories we missed in the last few weeks, like Lily Wachowski's trans fantasy film and how productions are shutting down because of allegations against Neil Gaiman. A new day dawns this week in fantasy movies. Let's begin. Starting off our news, Lance Todd just announced a distribution deal with Terror Films.
I am watching right now.
Beyond the North Woods is a time-bending found footage movie made by and starring my actual real-life friends, Lance Todd, Henriette Soderlund, and Matt Rasmussen.
There's no going back now. This is all actually happening.
And I'm not just hyping them up because they're my friends.
We are down in Duluth, Minnesota, where, if you've been on the internet, you know there is a string of mysterious disappearances. We're getting to the bottom of this.
This is a gripping, mind-bending trip of a found footage movie that starts out like a YouTube vlog and quickly devolves into an existential nightmare. And it's coming to Tubi and YouTube on October 18th.
All they care about is what is scary and in the woods.
We have so many trailers this week, but let's stick with the mind-bending vibes on Mr. K.
We have a new guest!
A Dutch film about dozens of people trapped in a hotel with impossible geometry.
The hotel is shrinking!
Then from Bong Joon-ho and Robert Pattinson, we have Mickey 17.
I guess I am feeling a little dizzy.
Oh, wow! Did you see that?
A space colonization film where Mickey's literal job is to keep doing dangerous jobs where he will die.
Even on my 17th go-around, I hate dying.
Which turns into an existential drama with stakes that could upend their world.
In the case of multiples,
It's just like
we exterminate every individual.
Coming to theaters January 31st. Shifting gears, Operation Blood Hunt follows a squad of American soldiers in World War II, stealing Japanese gold, and then beset by werewolves. But more interestingly is Family Pack.
Mais on joue à quoi exactement?
About a family just absolutely tuning out of this board game, and then getting Jumanji'd into that same board game.
On doit tous crever en 1497.
Now they're stuck in medieval France, and they have to identify all the werewolves in order to win the game and get home in one piece.
Courage, bonhomme!
Faut pas retirer la flèche!
Okay.
Coming to Netflix, October 25th. That's just one film from Netflix's Geek Week. We also have trailers for Castlevania Nocturne, Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft, and The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, a documentary following the story of a boy with multiple sclerosis who thrived in the game World of Warcraft. Then, from Max, we have a trailer for the new season of Gremlins, The Wild Batch.
America is our species' chance for a new beginning.
Paramount gave us one final trailer for Transformers 1, which is actually crushing it in the reviews.
Now is the time to stand together.
And Apple TV Plus dropped a trailer for Season 2 of Curses.
Our family home contains artifacts that were stolen, and we've been returning them to break the family curse.
In anime, Crunchyroll dropped a trailer for another season of Gun Gale Online, the spin-off to Sword Art Online.
この国のためにお前の協力が必要なのだ。
Then we have a full trailer for Nina the Starry Bride, a fantasy romance anime based on the manga with some ridiculously good reviews. Aniplex gives us a trailer for the new season of Blue Exorcist. There's also a new season of Rurouni Kenshin, Overlord the Sacred Kingdom coming to theaters soon, and a proper trailer for Demon Lord 2099, which suddenly looks less like the cyberpunk reverse isekai that we thought it was, and actually looks like guy struggles to pay rent and land a job.
いいかマキナ、頼りになるのはそなたの収入なのだ。
最低な男ね。
Which, if you think about it, is the most cyberpunk thing about this anime. Finally, Studio Shaft dropped a trailer for Virgin Punk. I can't find any plot details for this original cyberpunk anime movie, or English subtitles for the trailer, but that's okay, because this film is friggin' gorgeous, and the visuals alone have me so hooked. So you bet I'll be keeping an eye on this and watching it when it lands next summer. We've got a lot of trailers out of Netflix's Geeks Week event, but maybe the biggest news is that Netflix is going forward with the animated Magic the Gathering show. This project has seen a lot of false starts, like in 2019 when the Russo brothers were attached, and 2021 when the showrunner of Transformers Prime took a look at it. At one point, Brandon Ruth was attached to voice Gideon Jura, but they dumped that version of the show and Ruth's recordings in the process, leading him to say at one point that the entire show was scrapped. Instead, it turns out they just went a different direction. This kind of thing happens. Maybe not always this messy, but it happens. This new version of the show is helmed by Terry Matalas, a showrunner on Star Trek Picard and MacGyver. With all this turnover on the Magic adaptation, maybe the most consistent thing is that every attachment has been a talent in their own right with gobs of experience. So at the very least, we can be confident that no matter what form the final version takes, it'll be a solid solid show across the board. Netflix also gave us our first look at The Witcher: Sirens of the Deep, a film from the animation studio behind The Legend of Korra and Voltron. This version features voices from the same live-action cast like Anya Chalotra as Yennefer and Joey Batey as Jaskier, but of course notably doesn't include Henry Cavill as Geralt. The guy wearing the mantle this time is Doug Cockle, who famously voices Geralt in all the video games. The Witcher: Sirens of the Deep lands on February 11th. But not all is fine in the animation world. IGN released a report this week interviewing former Pixar employees who were laid off right before Inside Out 2 earned over $1 billion at the box office and became the biggest animated film ever. See, Pete Docter, the chief creative officer at Pixar, is under a lot of pressure to make the studio's movies do well. Disney dumps so much money into these that a movie needs to make $600 million just to break even, and each one is under pressure to make $1 billion, which is frankly a ridiculous bar to demand for any movie, even a Pixar film. So it's no wonder that despite being credited as an executive on Inside Out 2, Pete Docter actually served as an uncredited co-director. And sure, he knows what he's doing, but some sources tell IGN that there's a godlike worship of whoever's in charge at Pixar. It used to be John Lasseter until he got booted from the company over sexual harassment, but now the hero worship has fallen on Pete Docter when it should fall on nobody. So with all that pressure, Docter has swerved the company away from the more niche personal stories like Turning Red and more toward what he calls universal stories. The goal of this directive is to make stuff that can appeal to anyone, which is just blah. We're going to make a whole video essay about this at some point, but family films don't actually mean they're for families. They just exist to prop up a homogenized, white, heteronormative version of American culture. And this Universal Stories directive feels like another way to dress up that same attitude. It's no surprise, though, Disney's executives seem to be on a crusade against LGBTQ representation in its media, probably thanks to directives from the Chinese government to not show any homosexuality on screen. This was also at the same time as Disney employees were fighting against Ron DeSantis over Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. So when Lightyear became Pixar's biggest box office bomb, Disney executives decided that the reason it failed must be because of a single gay kiss, which was the exact wrong lesson. Lightyear failed because its marketing campaign was out of sync with what the film actually was, and because they replaced Tim Allen's Buzz Lightyear voice with Chris Evans for who knows what reason. Anyway, all of this background means that Disney works tirelessly to stamp out any possible reference to Riley even appearing gay. In this movie, she hits puberty and is friends with another girl, so Disney bent over backwards to remove any romantic chemistry and be as platonic as possible, demanding rewrites to make them less gay, and even going so far as to change how they lit the shots. All of this is bad enough, but then Disney decided at the 11th hour that, you know what, all of this is a little too expensive. Maybe we're just going to lay off a bunch of people at Pixar. Among the people they laid off were Angus MacLane, the director of Lightyear, and Galen Sussman, the woman who famously saved Toy Story 2 when Pixar accidentally wiped its servers. So now all the workers who got laid off have to figure out how to afford to keep living in the Bay Area. Pixar workers are notoriously underpaid for the area they live in, so they depend on the bonuses that come out when they finish a movie. But since they got laid off just before Inside Out 2 hit theaters, Disney was like, nope, that bonus only goes to current employees. It's a huge slap in the face, and Pixar workers don't have the benefit of falling back on a union like the Animation Guild because they live outside of Los Angeles County and they never took the effort to unionize. Maybe they will now. Oh, and fun fact, the absence of union activity in 3D animation was a big reason why Disney killed 2D animation back in the mid-2000s. 2D animators are unionized under TAG, but 3D animators don't start with that. No union deal meant that Disney could underpay its 3D animators, and that's the cost savings Disney was referring to when it made this switch. Anyway, between the hero worship of men who have been with the studio since George Lucas and Steve Jobs owned it, to the clampdown on LGBTQ relationships, to the rampant layoffs and crunch time, Disney is certainly going to take the wrong lessons from all of this. Because again, Inside Out 2 is the highest grossing animated film of all time. I'm not going to go quite so far as to say, hey, boycott Disney so they don't take the wrong lessons. But that's what I've been doing since 2019, and Disney executives only think in dollars. If you, like me, are upset with how Pixar workers are being treated, it's at least something to consider. In AI news, hot off the heels of Gavin Newsom signing sweeping new protections into law in California, Lionsgate announced a partnership with the AI company Runway to explore the use of AI in film production. In a press release, Lionsgate said they see AI as a tool for augmenting and supplementing what they have, and if it's just that, it may well be an appropriate use of AI for once. Hell, the WGA's AI protections are all about letting writers use AI to help them in the creative process and barring studios from requiring AI in a writer's process. This deal between Lionsgate and Runway sounds in line with those guidelines. Lionsgate plans to start using AI trained on its own library in place of storyboards, and then use it to create backgrounds and explosions for the visual effects process. But that doesn't help how exploitative it still feels. There's a big difference between a single artist using AI to augment their own process and a studio using AI to eliminate the need for artists. Storyboard artist has been an actual job for a century. They're also the first profession on the chopping block with the rise of AI, as we see here. Something like this sounds decent and fine on the face of it, but it can very easily become another notch in the way of shutting creative people out from the creative process, so that only big studios with access to expensive tools can ever create things. But hey, I've been away for a couple weeks. Here's just a little of what we missed. Francis Ford Coppola took Variety to court for defamation over Variety's claims that Coppola tried to kiss some of the extras on Megalopolis. And while we reported that one of the extras came to his defense and called him a sweet Italian grandpa, Coppola also is defending himself in court against another extra who says he kissed and touched her without her consent and that there wasn't an intimacy coordinator on the film. Meanwhile, Amazon has suspended production of Good Omens over numerous allegations against Neil Gaiman. 4 women now claim that he took advantage of employees and fans. All of this stems from a series of reports by Tortoise Media starting in July, and on an editorial note, the reports have been trickling out over the past couple months. We've held back on reporting on them because Tortoise Media is relatively new, it has funding ties to former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and at first it just looked like sensationalism to promote a podcast. We still aren't sure how much influence Tortoise Media's reporters get from up top, so we haven't used them as a primary source, but now we're seeing real-world ramifications beyond Tortoise Media's own reporting, and that's what this story right here is about. On top of Amazon holding back production on Good Omens, Disney also paused development on a feature film adaptation of The Graveyard Book, and New Zealand police are investigating at least one of the allegations. For his part, Gaiman has offered to step back from the 3rd season of Good Omens. In a report by Deadline, Gaiman made an offer to Amazon's producers to take a back seat amid the crisis. It's not an admission of wrongdoing. More likely, it's just an effort to turn down the current PR fire and let the show continue. In significantly more fun news, Lily Wachowski, co-director of The Matrix, is set to produce an animated film adaptation of the trans fantasy novel Hell Followed With Us. The creative team on this film has some major credits to their name, from Castlevania and Masters of the Universe to Seis Manos and Tomb Raider. In a statement to Deadline, the president of Trustbridge Entertainment says it's a visceral dystopian fantasy action horror, and turning it into an anime-inspired feature was a no-brainer. He calls it gut-wrenchingly honest, and says that this story in particular requires filmmakers with an authentic viewpoint to translate it. Lily Wachowski is hands down the highest-profile trans filmmaker in the business, so it makes perfect sense to have her name attached to the adaptation. I wish we could have told you about this sooner, but at least we can tell you now. Of course, the reason we couldn't tell you about it sooner is because we don't have processes set up yet to bring on additional writers, guest hosts, and co-editors. So when I'm out of commission to work on a movie set, the entire show grinds to a halt. All the more reason to support us on Patreon so we can hire more people than just me and get you the fantasy movie news you care about. We already have one patron. Thanks, Justin. But we'll need more to get this really working without a hitch every single time. On our Patreon, you'll get early access to these episodes the moment we finish editing them. You also get to see our process on Discord, where we post scripts ahead of time and talk about our upcoming plans. So what are you waiting for? Just $5 a month can help us reach our goal of making this a real job and delivering all this news each week on time. But for now, let's do the numbers. In streaming movies, the original Beetlejuice finally drops down to number 2, while Uglies rises to number 4. In series, the new season of Shogun brings it to number 1. Agatha All Along also premiered this week, but it only hit number 9 as of Saturday. Looking at the box office, Alien Romulus dropped down to the number 10 spot. It'll probably drop off the charts next week. Meanwhile, Transformers 1 launched just a hair behind Beetlejuice this weekend, which says less about the quality of Transformers 1 and more about the staying power of Beetlejuice. You saw how massive their premiere was. In fact, Transformers 1 already has such a good reception that there's already talk of making a sequel. Franchise producer Lorenzo Di Bonaventura said to Screen Rant that if this movie is successful, they will do a sequel. They already have plans for what the story will be, so it's a good thing this film is a hit among the critics and it's got some promising box office numbers. As part of its Geeks Week celebration, Netflix announced that its live-action Avatar adaptation has entered production for season 2. But we also heard of a few cancellations, including the Time Bandits remake on Apple TV Plus and the Ben 10 movie that had been in the works for years. Following in the footsteps of The Hunger Games, Twilight, and the series that must not be named, Frozen 3 and 4 are going to be the same story split into 2 movies. Zack Snyder explained to Entertainment Weekly that Twilight of the Gods isn't meant to be a cartoon and that you're supposed to take it very serious. To which I say, did you not learn from Rupert Sanders? If you have to explain your art, you're doing art wrong. George R.R. Martin had a lot of criticism of House of the Dragon the other week, but now he has nothing but praise for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. In a statement, Martin wrote that he had visited the set and loved what he saw. Of course, you already knew that because Elias Gallegos, his director of film and media, mentioned in our interview that Martin was out in Northern Ireland and loving what he saw. In related George R.R. Martin news, Paul W.S. Anderson has adapted his short story In the Lost Lands into a feature film, and now Vertical has acquired the US rights to the movie. It's a dark fantasy action thriller about a sorceress sent by the Queen into the wilderness in search of magical power. In a statement, Anderson says that the film has a completely unique visual style and uses cutting-edge technology. Which is all well and good, but you already have me at dark fantasy action film with Mila Jovovich and Dave Bautista. You don't have to sell me on it. Finally, the release date for Kongava has been pushed back to November 14th, but it looks like it's actually getting a worldwide release now, so get ready for that primal rage. This week is packed for new releases. Megalopolis finally comes to theaters along with Dragon Keeper, The Wild Robot, and Bagman all on Thursday. Then on Friday, we get the long-awaited 4K re-release of The Fall, and then Uzumaki premieres on Toonami late that night. That'll do it for this week in fantasy movies. We're out of the woods. Check out the Patreon link in the description and join us on Discord. We'll have more in fantasy movies next week.